Okay, hello all. So for my national law, I'm going to discuss the Every Student Succeeds Act for the United States. Keep in mind, this is a big, complicated law, and this is going to be kind of just a helicopter view of the law, its strengths, its weaknesses, as well as, from my personal perspective, just what I think is its overall success in terms of creating an education environment um, that will actually teach kids and be successful. So this is the Obama administration's signature education policy achievement passed in December 2015. And it attempted to build on, correct some of the shortcomings of and address just the overall issues with the No Child Left Behind Act. And that is his successors, George W. Bush's signature policy achievement. And again, another helicopter overview of this law. Um, what that law essentially attempted to do was create a federal um, federal measure for holding schools accountable for the success of their students and for their teachers. And it did this at, when I say federal, I just mean across the board, every single state, every school, kind of one size fits all approach. And the main tool it used to do this was reading and math scores. So the issue, of course, was that this was incredibly rigid. It didn't really address a lot of the underlying issues with inequality um, and just the differences in availability of resources and the income of families between districts. And it also created a lot of perverse incentives for schools. Basically, schools were teaching the tests, and teachers were very much incentivized to teach the tests because their performance was being tied to the success of their students. It also required yearly improvement in test scores. So it ended up being kind of a chokehold on a lot of schools and kind of had the opposite effect in many districts. It didn't really provide a path or an incentive structure that actually improved education in the U.S. school system. So what the Every Student Succeeds Act attempted to do was kind of build on the accountability framework, because obviously any system needs a way to hold everyone accountable for their performance. Doesn't matter what you're talking about. So education is no different. There needs to be a way to hold teachers accountable for the performance of students. So what it attempts to do is build on this. It pulls the federal government back. There's no longer a one-size-fits-all federally mandated score that everyone has to hit. It just provides a framework that states need to use and basically mandates that states need to have their own targets. So rather than just using reading and math scores, they add English language proficiency scores, high school graduation rates, and then a fifth measure that is chosen, a fifth academic measure that is chosen by each state. So again, it's just I'm kind of it's hard not to take a kind of personal view of what this law attempts to do, because it really is about federal versus state, which is the better way to go. And interestingly enough, the previous law passed under George W. Bush really was a big push in the use of the federal government to have this kind of very blanket approach to creating education standards. Um, this failed because every single state is different, and it's just such. The U.S. is a massive country. It's hard to address every single issue in every single district for every single student with this massive one size fits all approach. Um, so this law pulls the federal government back in a way, but then this again, there's just no standard really. The states are just kind of left to do what they please. There's just a framework, and this again creates its own issues, especially related to inequality. And it's really hard to talk about education policy without talking about inequality, because so many issues related to poor performance in U.S. public school system is just, I mean, You can look at it district by district. The schools that receive less funding, where families have lower incomes, are just going to be performing worse than districts that receive more funding, that have a larger tax base for public funding, and that have higher income families. So this doesn't really address that in any way, and I see that as a big negative. Another shortcoming, it still is just focused on test scores. Everything is just about how students are performing on tests, and it seems like a very old-fashioned way of thinking. And I don't really know what else to say about it except for that. So thanks very much. Hope you enjoyed that, again, very broad overview of that law. Thank you.